The scorpion and frog story is a modern day fable. In the story, a scorpion asks a frog to carry the scorpion across a river. The frog hesitates, out of fear that the scorpion will sting it. But the scorpion puts down a great argument. It says, "If I sting you, frog dear friend, in the middle of the river, then we'll both surely drown, so it would just make no sense for me to do so." Needless to say, the frog was absolutely flawed. Great logic, scorpion. And agreed to allow the scorpion on the frog's back and began swimming with the scorpion across the river. Halfway through the swim, the scorpion stings the frog, and they both begin sinking underwater. As they're both about to drown, the frog turns to the scorpion and says, "Why on earth would you do that? That's entirely outrageous. Now we're both doomed." And the scorpion looks at him, thinks for a moment, and replies, "It's in my nature." The fable of the scorpion and the frog reminds us that if we act on impulse alone, if we act without taking time to sit with our feelings and allow them to move through us, we can undermine our own cause. One of the patterns I see today is that there is a tendency to discharge our feelings. For example, often on social media, onto others. We have a tendency to speak towards others rather than with them. Especially online, there is a pervasive policing of others, an argumentative tone that persists, a judgment of the feelings expressed. In other words, we should be feeling more about climate change, or you shouldn't be so worried about it. It doesn't take too much time scrolling on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram to find people being vitriolic, condescending, insulting, offensive, and rude in the name of a perspective. Cancel culture is quick to move, and now I'm not even sure if cancel culture has been cancelled itself. It's very tempting to go on a rant using the keyboard. It's also very tempting to go on a rant in conversation, and it does feel good to do so. But we all know that often it's not productive and doesn't help us use our feelings to advance our cause. But then what to do? We've sat with our feelings, we've talked about them in groups, and then what? This is often the question I hear, and before we go into how we take any action, I want to make a brief disclaimer. I think we need to be really careful when moving into action. We need to be careful that we are not still driven by the effort to eradicate our fear. Instead, that we are driven by a real need and deep down desire to pursue something of greater importance to us. And how do we know this? Values help us know what we stand for in life and offer us ideas for committed action. And how do we know our values? Well, this is tricky. But knowing our values has been documented as such an important endeavor if we are to commit to meaningful action in our lives. So what I'm going to offer you now is a brief visualization that I've used before that can help you get in touch with your values. So without further ado, let's get started. See if you can find a comfortable position, feeling your back, your neck supported, and perhaps letting your eyes close at this point. And begin by bringing your attention to your breath. As you take a deep breath in, take a few deep breaths. Imagine moving forward through time. Imagine yourself aging and growing older as you move through life. Imagine now that you're turning 100 years old, and on your birthday, you've decided to celebrate. I invite you to imagine what the celebration would be like. Imagine celebrating in the way that is most desirable to you. You might like to imagine the setting, the style of celebration. You might like to imagine who is there at your celebration and who you would like to be there, even if that means they would be much, much older. There could even be people you haven't met yet at your celebration. And now the time has come where people are starting to give speeches. And the first person gets up to give a speech about you. And as this first person gets up, imagine who it is. And as they begin their speech, they start talking about what you stood for as a person. Instead of imagining what they would likely say, imagine what would you want them to say? What would you want them to say about you? Now imagine the first person stepping down and the next person getting up to speak. Imagine it's someone very close to you. Take a moment now and imagine what you would most want them to say about the impact you've had. See if you can let yourself hear them saying that. Now, as this person finishes what they are saying, they step down. And you look around one more time at your 100th celebration, taking it in. And as you breathe it in, allow yourself to start to drift back in time again, taking some deeper breaths and allowing yourself to arrive back in the moment where you are right now. Begin to gently let your eyes open and return. And as you open your eyes, perhaps stretch, taking your surroundings, do a bit of tay-tay, shake it off. And I'll give you just a few seconds now. If you want to write anything down or reflect on what came up for you. After this video, you might like to think about who you imagine speaking and what you wanted them to say. This is just one way to connect with your values and can start to help you think about which actions are the most important for you. Of course, this differs for everyone. For the Scorpion, the sting is its most powerful impulse, if used at an effective time. For us, knowing our values can help us determine when to channel our impulses and feelings and how to do so to guide us towards meaningful action.